Welcome to the Soberish Uprising. My name is Holly Crevo, a former heavy drinker who started a Soberish Uprising of her own a little over a year and a half ago, and everything in her life has changed. On Soberish Uprising, we tell stories of finding freedom from alcohol on our own terms and encouraging others to do the same. So today, I am excited to have Elizabeth Nell on. Good evening, Elizabeth.
Hi, good evening, Holly. So nice to be here.
To be here with you. We connected on LinkedIn. I had posted, that I had this podcast, and you were like, "Oh my gosh, I want to share my story," and loved it. I think, you'll share more with our listeners, but you have so many different
Yeah.
pieces of how alcohol played a role in your life, and
Yeah.
so I'm really excited to dive into that with you.
Yeah. No, that's great. And I was just thinking, I feel like I've had a couple of uprisings related to alcohol in
Yeah.
my journey that that have
Yeah.
led me here.
Yeah. Well, like as coaches, you have one, you level up, you have another, right? You're never totally, it's just you see new things.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Well, awesome. Well, first of all, would love to hear what made you kind of reach out and say, "Hey, I want to share this story." What was it that for you?
Yeah, I think it was just because your post, your story resonated with me, and
Mhm.
the sober-ish. I think the sober-ish word is I really connected with, because I think
Mm,
that's sort of how I describe my own relationship with alcohol these
yeah.
days. But I do know that that it's been a story that has, when I've talked to people in my own circle, it's a story that's resonated with people in terms
Mm,
of just their own path with alcohol, but also about just facing a big change in their lives, because it's all tied into some big changes I made in my life,
yeah.
and honestly, the coaching work that I do to
Yeah.
help women do that. But yeah, I mean, when you shared that on your LinkedIn, I just thought, yeah, like I would love to just have a conversation with you,
Yeah.
really, just kind of share stories together. So,
Yes, yes. And
you know,
whoever's listening will listen. If not, it's just a great
yeah,
conversation.
yeah, exactly.
Well, tell me what you shared, which I think is super fascinating. You worked in the alcohol beverage and packaging industry
Yeah,
as a branding expert. Tell me
yeah.
what was your relationship like with alcohol during that time? Tell me a little bit about Elizabeth during that time of
Mhm.
your life.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, it was interesting. I mean, before, when I'd been working in the branding industry, I'd worked on all different kinds of products for a long part of my
Mhm.
career. And then all of a sudden, at one point I got placed onto a big alcoholic beverage brand account. I
Mhm.
don't have to name names, but
Yeah. Yeah.
the brand. And even at the moment, it was funny because I was like, I was actually never really a big drinker,
Okay.
because, and we'll get into more of this, but because I did have an alcoholic father. So
Mm.
growing up, witnessed how his drinking impacted him, and it actually made me want to do sort of the opposite for a long
Yeah.
time, where I didn't want to, I wasn't a big drinker. I didn't drink in high school, didn't wasn't a big drinker in college. It just was never my thing. But so then I started on this account, working on this account, and all of a sudden it became like, "Ooh, this is fun!" Like, I ever
Mhm.
talk to people, they're like, "Wow, your job is like you get to like drink vodka or drink alcohol," and I'm like,
Yeah.
"Yeah." And at first I was like, "Yeah, it is." Like, of all the products to work on, it was more interesting and exciting than, say like baby food products or things like, you know, it had a certain allure to it.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
during that time, it's funny because I only really realized this in looking back, but when I first started working on that account, I realized it actually tied into, I think it was the year that my dad became so ill because of his alcohol that he was waiting for a liver transplant.
Mm.
So it happened to tie in that I was doing that at the same time he was, waiting for a liver transplant and not drinking anymore because of that. But um, I just was very good at compartmentalizing, and so
Mm.
I didn't really like see the two of those together. so for several years I was working on that, even, through my dad. He did get a liver transplant and, became a whole new person for, the like 5 years after that, the 5 years that I was working in this alcohol brand industry. And I also noticed during that time, I mean, I did start drinking more because it was sort of, sometimes it was my job, which I did always have a hard time squaring with, because I would go to client meetings and have to taste the whole range of alcohols.
Yeah.
And sometimes it was 10 in the morning and having to, and I was like, oh, this isn't that appealing. But then there was also the whole group of us that worked on this account. We had to explore and understand the whole layout of the industry. So we were always in the office. We had what we called Thursday Fridays, where Thursday, at the end of the day on Thursdays, we'd get out all of our samples from work and just start mixing them and drinking them. And it was fun. It was messy, at times. But again, I was like, it's okay.
Yeah.
So I'll pause there. But like that, that was sort of those first few years. It was like my dad was dealing with his own battle with alcohol, and I was kind of diving more into it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you said that compartmentalizing too, right? You were able to how were you able to do that? Like, when looking back, like, what was that for you?
Yeah. I mean, what it was a lot of the time was I would be like, no, this has nothing to do. Like, this is just a product. I'm working on any product. I'm not forcing people to be alcoholics. I'm not forcing them to drink. I'm creating a brand design or a brand story. And so it's nothing to do with that. Nothing to, it was, I guess in my mind, I had like sort of a block up for quite a while. And I was like, oh, this is fun. This is entertaining. And then sometimes people be like, people who, family members would be like, that's interesting that you're working in that field. But it was just really something that was like, nope, I can keep it separate. Like my life outside of work is my life. And this is not, this is just work. And it worked for a long time. And honestly, then I think because my dad had a liver transplant and then was healthy for 5 years without drinking, it almost made it like, oh, it's okay. Like I can do this work.
Yeah.
And I was also like, and I don't have a problem with my alcohol intake. And that's, I think, it's different for everyone, but that's not what led me to become sober-ish. It wasn't that I had a reliance or I couldn't not drink, but it just was sort of the whole world of it that kind of became complicated. And to be honest, like for a while I was drinking more than I wanted to, than I would have liked.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so as time went on, I actually, my dad was healthier or had his, new liver. And because of my work in this industry, I was becoming more and more of sort of an industry expert and got sort of what was my dream job, working for, like, leading the New York studio for this branding and packaging design agency that's like the best in the world for that industry, and still are. And they're one, and I love them. I don't work for them anymore because of some of these changes, but I was like, this is amazing. I have this amazing, incredible job now. I'm an expert in this field. And, again, one of those things, funny looking back, the first week I started working there, my dad's health shifted. And he got diagnosed with cancer then. And it was a cancer that we ultimately learned he couldn't fight because of the liver transplant. And it was liver cancer, it was lung cancer. It sort of spread very quickly, but his body couldn't handle the chemo because he was on immune suppression drugs because of the transplant. So he was getting sick. And so I ultimately blame the alcohol for his cancer as well, or for his sickness from that. So again, I was like, okay, keep it separate. Like my splitting off happened again. And I was diving deeper and deeper into the alcoholic beverage world. And again, still feeling like I have to drink for work. Like it was expected.
Yeah.
You know, whether it was, I mean, I ran the client relationships. I was taking the clients out when they were in town, or I was going to their cities and not only just sitting in their meetings, tasting the liquor, but, you know, going out with them. And, you know, it was never a pressure put on me. I didn't feel that I could decline drinking in that moment. So as time went on, unfortunately, my dad lost his battle with cancer when I was just a few months into that job. But I, again, was sort of maybe like, well, I can continue to work in this field. There was still nothing. It was still not just, it wasn't sort of clicking to me that there was anything strange about it, I guess, really. Or, you know, it just was. I'm like, because again, I'm like, I don't have a problem drinking myself. So it's okay. Yeah. If I was like my dad, then it would have been a bigger issue. Like, you know, so I had the ability to kind of keep it separate there. And, you know, it went on a few more years, even after I lost my dad, but then there's sort of the next chapter. So there was of that, and I'll pause there in case, you know.
Yeah, no, I'm like,
keep
thank
rambling.
You. No, thank you for sharing that. It's like that what I'm hearing is like a little bit of like, is this right? No, it's right. Like the kind of making those negotiations and that bargaining and like reasoning, right? It's almost in this, you didn't say this, but it's almost, you know, like a public defender, right? Or somebody that has a job that's like, somebody's going to do it. Like, and I'm talented at it and I don't have a problem. And there's a lot of people who drink responsibly. So like, you know, it's not like I'm, you know, but it's like, why is it any difference in like marketing this chapstick?
Right.
So you can talk yourself into that. I could see that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and tell me, like, you know, and I always say, I'm like, alcohol does a great job. It is, I mean, it is branded, it's marketing. It is like, it does so well. So I would like, I would love to hear, you know, when you got into that industry, did you realize like when you got into the industry of, you know, the alcohol beveraging and branding, were you fully aware of like the power behind the marketing force of alcohol?
I would say yes, in that I'd been already working in branding and packaging for a bunch of years before that. So just as any consumer product, there's power in that. And I already knew, you know, you have like 20 seconds to catch someone's attention when they're looking at scanning the shelf to buy a product. So, I mean, you have to make an emotional connection in some way in order to get someone to buy your product, if it's not by word of mouth. And so yes, I mean, I was aware there needed to be that. I mean, that ultimately, yes, we were trying to make a connection so someone would want to buy and drink and keep buying and keep drinking this brand, whatever brand. You know, I worked on many, many different brands, but that's always the goal. It's like, well, yes, it could be pretty and you might want to buy it once, but there's also that part like, but they need to keep buying it again and again for it to be successful. And so it's, you know, and I think, but it's true. I think it's, you know, going to some of the industry events and that sort of thing where sort of like to bring consumers in, to get them to become brand, you know, their own ambassadors for the brand. Like it's tricky. It's tricky. And I had seen years before that, I had always said, I'll never work on a cigarette brand like that. I drew a line with that one.
Yeah.
It's like, I will not work on cigarettes. And yet, like, honestly, when I think of it now, like, there's no difference.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, maybe you can argue that, yes, like, there's no redeeming quality perhaps to cigarettes.
Yeah.
And maybe some people could argue that alcohol doesn't automatically mean it's going to kill you.
Yeah.
But
Right.
I mean, we would sort of joke, and I won't say, like, there is a joke, like, what you're drinking, pick your poison. Like, that's the phrase. Like, what's your poison?
Yeah.
It's like, we know it's not good for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And like the difference, right? And I think it's gonna be fascinating in like 20 years, like, because I do think younger generations are like, we don't smoke and we don't drink, right? Like that's just like they're like, that's insane. But like, I think there's an age of like, I grew up, like, I'm 43, grew up with like Sex and the City and like Always a Glass, and like it was like this generation that like, and all of a sudden you look at it and you look at all the what it does to your health and mental, physical well-being, spirituality, and you're just like, that is just as bad as cigarettes. And it'll be interesting, long story long, is in 20 years, or we're going to look back and be like, wow, like that was just as bad as smoking on a plane.
Yeah. Oh yeah, completely. I mean, I can see us, like, we're inching there.
Yeah.
We're inching there, but it's going to be a slower process, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, tell me, when was there a time when you were like, this conflict just, it's not, this isn't it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. There's a couple of levels to that as well, because again, sort of as I was continuing to work in that job, like, it was a stressful job, deadlines. I was traveling constantly, like flying back and forth to cities in the Midwest same day, for client meetings. So I was exhausted. I was working a lot.
Yeah.
Didn't really have much of a life outside of work. So my stress levels were so much that I started looking, and, honestly, there, full disclosure, I deal with depression as well. And so when that was, the stress and depression kind of bring that up, I luckily started looking for some outlets that would make me feel good. Like, in terms of, aside from, not drinking, but, I had some friends that kept trying to convince me to go to this specific workout class. I don't have to name a brand if we don't have to, but a specific workout class. And at that time I was about 42. I'm 53 now. I was 42, and I hadn't really ever worked out, but I was like, okay, maybe I'll try that. Maybe that'll help with my stress, some depression. I also started going to some meditation classes to learn about that. And, started tapping into what I guess became sort of my next chapter, which started to be more and more about wellness, health, and my wellness. And so, as I got hooked on the workouts. It's an indoor cycling class, got hooked on that, got really into meditation. And all of a sudden I realized how those were helping me de-stress and helping with my stress, my depression, all those things. And I also started to notice with the workouts, like, if I went after having a drink the night before, if I went to a workout class, how awful I felt trying to do that workout, because it was an intense one. And so slowly, just with that, I was like feeling less and less like I wanted to drink, because I just didn't feel as good. So that was starting my first thing where I was like, okay, that's shifting me to not want to drink as often. And so I was drinking less related to work situations, but I still was like, but I still feel like I have to drink for certain work occasions, and so that was sort of the first stage. But then, it definitely, it was a couple of years of that where I was like, this doesn't feel, that's where that tension started coming in. And then I started getting to this point during that time where I was like, well, I don't really want to do this work anymore, but like, what the heck else would I do? Like, I've become an expert in this. This is what I know. I'm doing well at it. I'm making good money. Like, I can't just walk away from it. And then, it was continuing that. And then there was one day that I was at one of those. I had flown, to Kentucky for a business meeting where it was, the 10:30 a.m. Here's our range of 5 whiskeys we have. Let's taste them all and compare. And I was sitting there and I thought, I can barely choke this down and I can't do this anymore. And shortly thereafter is when I made the decision to say, I'm walking away and I'm going to do something completely different. I didn't even quite know what that was yet. But I knew, I was like, during that time I had started digging in on like, well, what could I even do? What would I want to do if I could leave? And so there were things germinating, but mostly what I knew is I had started to dig into my values, uncovering my values, which may sound familiar to you since we both come from this coaching background now, which is the shift I made. But and it's something I work on a lot with clients now. But I spent a lot of time really thinking, what is important to me to feel fulfilled? What do I need in my life? And that's when it just became clear and clear that I was like, this job, the benefits of it there's really benefits of it, but it's not aligned with so many of my values. And I can't do work anymore that makes me feel like I might be harming some people out there. And it may be an extreme way to put it, but I was like, I want to be helping people instead of potentially hurting.
Yeah. What are your values? Do you mind sharing? Like, what are your top 3 values that maybe in that moment, because values can shift, right? As we adapt and grow. Yeah. Like at that moment, what were the top values that you felt were in conflict?
Yeah. Well, one of the top value right then was, one of my biggest values then and now was compassion and helping others. And so another one was integrity. And then another one is sort of exploration, which is kind of tied to growth, like always wanting to explore and grow. So the integrity one is was a big one when I was like, I am not living in my integrity right now. When I'm like, I don't want to drink. I don't want to try to help other people sell brands to make people drink.
Yeah.
This is just, it's the opposite. It was so strongly like, nope. And so the compassion value and helping others also felt like just in direct conflict.
Yeah.
So I was like, nope. And
once you see it and feel it, you can't unsee it and unfeel it, right? When you notice that integrity, especially that integrity, right? And I always talk about that. I'm like, I was saying one thing and doing another all the time. And that felt so gross to me, right? And I did it. And I know you're not alone. I'm not alone. People aren't alone, right? You're like, I want to be this person, but I continue to do this one thing that doesn't match. What thing doesn't match here? And you're like, oh, it's this.
Yeah.
And it's like,
yeah. And I think, that makes me remember the other value that was strong then was health and wellness. And that was the me outside of work was like, no, I'm going to my workout classes, several days a week. I'm, drinking the green juices. I'm eating healthy, I am doing mind, body, soul things, meditation. And that also was like, nope, this is a direct conflict.
Yeah.
Again. So it was like, I got to a point where I was like, I can't compartmentalize it anymore. It's like, And
What do you think
so,
it was that
yeah,
at that moment, like, stopped the compartmentalizing? Or do you think it was just, like, a slow growth that you or
it was a slow growth, but but I also can pin it to, I mean, the slow growth started when I had an uncle who passed away before my dad did,
Mm,
who had been he'd been a recovery, sober for 40 years or something, got into the yoga wellness world. He passed away from cancer, but his passing opened my eyes to meditation. Like,
mm,
he'd always talked to me about it, and I sort of took that. It was one of those moments of like, okay, there's a message here for the life's too short message kind of coming
yeah,
up. And then, when my dad passed just a couple of
mm,
years later, that was it. That was the other big aha of like, okay, life's too short. Like,
mhm,
but it was a slow burn because, again, he passed and I was still working in that industry for a few years, but it was definitely like, okay, life's too short to be spending the time on things that are not. I don't think I could even articulate the values part of things at
yeah,
that moment, but it was
mhm,
when I was starting to be like, okay, what do I want to do with, what are the things that are important to me in my life? What do I
mhm,
want to be doing to make the most of this?
yeah,
Um, so it is probably around the time that I definitely cut back a lot in my own drinking,
mhm,
and part of that was also because, like, the more you have to drink for work, the less you want to. There's part of that too.
yeah,
It got to that point when it's like all your if your work is alcohol, it's it's not as appealing
yeah,
anymore.
yeah,
If like you're surrounded by it all day. I've heard that with chefs. If you're cooking for other
mhm,
people all day,
mhm,
you don't want to cook when you get home.
yeah, yeah,
So, but yeah, it was a couple of those like big, like, life's too
mm,
short moments that started that. But it was a slow build because it's scary to think about major big changes like that.
yeah. Right, and I mean,
Yeah.
and not only that, it was part of your, like, social, your work, like, it
Mhm.
was in every aspect
Mhm.
of your life, and like you said, those changes and again, I'm
Yeah.
always so quick, I'm like, it makes sense we're drinking at the rate we're drinking at. It makes sense that it's part of our culture, right? Like, we're not doing anything wrong if all of a sudden you're like,
Mhm.
"Half a bottle or a bottle every night," like, that's probably not what I should but it like, branding has done its job, society has done its job, everybody's done a really great job, and
Yeah.
then you like you said, that noticing inside yourself to be like, "This isn't it. Like, I can't continue at this pace."
Mhm.
But always really saying, "No, that's" and I guess I bring that up for that slow. It makes sense that sometimes it's slow because it's hard to make that
Yeah.
change, and you're like, "That's why
Yeah.
sober-ish is important for me because I to stay completely
Yeah.
sober, that's a lot for a lot of us, right? To be
Mhm.
like, "For the rest of my
Yeah.
life, forever?" Like, that's a lot.
Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
slow burn is a normal, right? That slow, like,
Yep.
pull and push and should I, shouldn't
Mhm.
I? Like, so just
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that because I think it's really important that it's like some people, it takes a while before you're finally like, "No."
Yeah. 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 So with the alcohol, like, it was that slow burn, and I think from that point in the as I finished out my career, those last few years of my career, I was like, I'm not drinking spirits anymore. I might drink
Mhm.
a glass of wine here and there. So that was sort of my slow transition to
Yeah.
like, and it made a difference because I was like, oh, I can't drink the brown liquor. I can't, so
Mhm.
it was slowly that, but then it then slowly became like, on work days when if on Fridays, if someone would make Friday afternoon cocktails for the office, I would say, nope, I'm not going to have
Mhm.
anything today. Like, because I'm going to go to a workout, or
Yeah.
I'm just not going to have anything. Um, and then,
How was
I
that
mean, would it be,
perceived in that
yeah,
industry? I'm sorry, I'm curious. Like, how was that
no,
perceived?
yeah, it, it was, I guess my hesitance is coming up where, like, it's hard to answer because I think it's because it was not, it was hard to be received. But I was hiding.
Mhm.
I wasn't making it public. So again, like, I would
Mhm.
let that be known to my immediate coworkers
Yeah.
around me, like people I worked with there, because I felt comfortable enough there. And they were good at not judging or not, pushing. Um, but I think I probably did often use the excuse that I was going to be going to a workout. Like that was my
Yeah.
reason for not
Yeah.
drinking.
Yeah.
It wasn't that like, I don't want to drink the anymore, but there was some, but I wasn't open about it with clients.
Mm-hmm.
So I would still take a few sips of the drink if it was for work.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, I'm drinking because it's my job. So I was concerned that they wouldn't see me as an expert in the industry if I wasn't drinking the product. Whether that's true or not, I can't say for sure, because but that's how it was perceived. And and then in some kind of bigger outings, I mean, again, it's such the social norm that whether it's for work things or otherwise, everybody's just like, yeah, just have one, have a drink. I mean, everything we talk about, I mean, that's how it's marketed to us.
Yeah.
Like, have a drink to unwind. Moms who have a tough day, like, have, mommy juice. Like, it's
every
so
reason.
wrong.
You're sad, you're happy, you're anxious, you're like anything. It's like, have a drink.
Celebrate, right? Have a drink. And I mean, and I did have to mindfully start letting go of some friendships around that time too, that had people I'd been friends with where that's what our activity was, like going out and drinking a lot. And I was like, I want to be around people who are drinking less. I want to be doing things. I joked because I would start going to workouts with a friend as our like hangout, like a bar class, and I'd be like, now our way of meeting up at the bar is by going to a bar class. Like, it's a
different bar.
Different bar. But yeah, I mean, it's been mixed with different. It's been met with different things, or it was. It's changed quite a bit, I would say, in the last few years. But
what is, if you don't mind me asking, like, what is your sober, like, what is your drinking habit? Like, what are they now after you've gone to coaching school? We can talk more about that, but like, what are they now?
Well, now they are, I don't call myself sober because I may have, maybe I'll have a glass of wine or a beer, maybe once a month. If it feels like, what, I'm out to a nice dinner and I might like a really nice glass of Sancerre, like, if it's for the taste of it. It's still like, since leaving that job back in 2019, no, I definitely haven't had any spirits, no vodkas, whiskeys, like I don't drink those anymore because I'm like, even as I was drinking, I would even not feel good as I was drinking it, even just one, so it's like, I don't even want that. So yeah, I say soberish. I mean, and it really started, honestly, for me, the real soberish commitment to myself started early in the pandemic.
Okay.
Which, for some was like, one of those moments where people were drinking a lot at home, perhaps. I wasn't necessarily, but I was like, it felt like when we started the pandemic, everything was like, well, let's have a Zoom happy hour. Let's do that. And I was like, can we figure out something that doesn't have to revolve around drinking? Like, can we call it doesn't have to be a happy hour. Like, let's meet for drinks over Zoom. But I very quickly was like, this is a great opportunity for me. Like, I don't want to be drinking. So I then chose to lean into, I actually organized a few like Zoom afternoon teas, like,
fun.
For people who were like, instead of that, to offer, like, it doesn't have to be about like having a drink at the end of this day during this crazy time we're all going through. But that's when I really started getting into making mocktails. Like, I got into, do you know the book Good Drinks by Julia Bainbridge? Oh, check her out. It's a great book, and that, like, some really delicious beverages to make to still feel like you're having the experience of it. And so that gave me an activity. I got really into like making different different
Mhm.
non-alcoholic beverages. And so yeah, I mean, that's where,
Mhm.
so again, it's not that I've sworn off it completely, but
Yeah.
maybe once a month, or sometimes it might be like every other month even.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's
I'm
not like
not
a
saying
part of your
never.
life. But it's not like a
No,
part of, like, it kinda comes up, but it's not like a consistent piece. Yeah.
not at all. Not at all. It just, and now at this point, it just doesn't appeal to me in any way.
Mhm.
It's,
Yeah.
especially if I still, when I still hear people talking about like, oh, I'm hangover, I drank too much last night. I'm like, oh, that's awful. Like, I feel so
Yeah.
good without alcohol.
Right.
Why would I want to go back to that?
Yeah. I
Like,
know we're like, we need to talk more about how good it feels to wake up sober, right? Like,
yeah,
it feels so consistently, right? You're like,
so
"Oh my
good.
gosh," like, not
Yeah.
like, we don't talk about it enough. Like, yes, like,
No.
a buzz is fun, yeah, like, all that, but you're like, talk about, like, being sober for months or, like, weeks, whatever, and you're like, "Whoo, that feels
Yeah.
really good too."
So, like, so good. So good. And it feels really good to, like, I think sometimes I consider myself kind of like shy, introverted, kind of with
Mm,
groups of
mhm.
people. So, of course, there were times where like it would feel like, oh, a crutch to have a drink to
Yeah.
loosen me up. But now I'm like, actually, like, I am so glad at the end of the night to not have to be like, oh boy, I sounded dumb when I said that thing
Mm,
because
yeah.
I was like a little tipsy, you know. um, like, it just, yeah, it just feels so good without it.
Mhm. That's amazing. Well,
Yeah.
tell me,
Yeah.
I'm curious, like,
Mm.
how did it, how did it when you quit kind of drinking, how did that affect your depression? Like, did those
Yeah, I mean, I mean, it's, my depression is, or how do we even say it? Like, much better. Like, I don't,
yeah, yeah, not as
I
bad.
mean, it's not as bad, and I was,
Mhm.
there's other factors to
Yeah,
that, and
yeah.
all the other things I was doing to help
Mhm.
with that, and um, but alcohol is a depressant,
Mhm.
so even if I was doing pretty well, like if I was drinking a little bit, like it could, you know, and I was always kind of a lightweight, so even if it was always like one drink hits me, but if two drinks, forget it,
Yeah.
and then the depressive thoughts might come up, or
Mm,
the self doubts would get stronger, or just the
yeah.
feeling bad about myself. And so without alcohol, I can just be like, yeah, like, it's,
Mm,
I feel good. It's
yeah.
like, it is part of my toolbox of things that help me
Mm,
not get depressed.
yeah.
It's, I can feel good about my choice and feel good
Mhm.
about what I'm doing, and
Yeah.
that ties into all aspects of my life. But
Mm.
yeah,
Thank you for
I
sharing
it's
that.
yeah,
Thank
of
you.
course, of
Yeah,
course,
and I
yeah,
think it's because I
yeah,
think it's a lot of times, like, it doesn't mean the depression goes away. It doesn't mean that all your problems go away, but it does make it easier to manage and probably easier to process, and
yeah,
I was talking about, like, I didn't think I was an anxious person until I quit drinking, and
yeah,
I was like, "Oh, I did have, like, a low
yeah.
key edginess," right? Just, like, even
Mhm.
so I think it's like, when we talk about that, I think it's
Yeah,
important to be like, "No, like, it may not cure your anxiety or depression, but it's not gonna hurt it."
yeah, right. It didn't exacerbate it. I mean, it
Right.
doesn't. The alcohol exacerbated the
Yeah.
symptoms,
Yeah. For sure.
and so taking that out of the equation, you know,
Yeah.
and it also means like, okay, I'm not trying to. I mean, I wasn't necessarily intentionally doing this, but it's not trying to numb the feelings of
Mm, mhm.
anything, which ultimately isn't. It doesn't work anyway with
Yeah.
alcohol, because it's going to make you feel things.
Yeah. Oftentimes, you're like you wake up the next morning, you're like, "Oh, that wasn't as bad as I thought. Why did I think that?" You're like, "Oh, because I had 3 glasses of wine. That's probably why I
Yeah.
thought it was terrible last night."
Right.
Well, and
Right.
then, a couple things and, I'm curious,
Uh-huh.
would love to
Mhm.
hear, first what, the coaching that you do, like,
Mhm.
tell us a little bit about the coaching that you do now.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the coaching that I do is basically to support women who wanna make big changes in their lives and face changes with courage and confidence and clarity, get clarity on what that is. And, for the most part, it's women who are want to make a big change in their job or their career. So transitioning that way, because, sort of building off of my own personal story and, how I had to figure out complete career change. I don't recommend everyone does it exactly the way I do it, of course, but I'm a coach. So of course I wouldn't tell anyone to do it the same way, but, I am also a person who's often been I've been comfortable with making big changes in my life. And so that's why I call myself a conscious change coach, because I'm a certified coach with a specialty in transitions but it's about like choosing and the intention to make that change and, and face the fear that comes up with it and find the way to approach it. So that's where it really comes into play. Sometimes it's other life changes people are making. The funny part is I haven't yet come across where any part of the coaching I've done has branched into sort of the alcohol journey. But that is a big life change for many people too. But I guess but it's really about supporting women as they make the changes they want to make in their life. So that could be anything, whether it's work or something in lifestyle.
Thank you for sharing. That's great. And I think, like you said, that change and like changing your relationship with alcohol could be one of the biggest changes you ever make, right? Depending on not severe, just what you're dealing with and how, like, because when we do changes, like fears come up and doubts and all that, and like staying true with values. And I'm curious, what's something you would want us to know about branding of alcohol? Any I don't want to give any trade secrets away, but like anything you would want us to know about that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not really a super secret thing, but I think it is, that alcohol branding, a lot of it is the brand wants to connect with you on an emotional level and resonate with you in some way. And it wants to tell a story. So there's stories behind it, whether it shows up in the packaging or in the messaging or that sort of thing, that's meant to attract people, attract certain people. And they can be sort of targeted, like depending on the type of person going for it. There's some brands that are intentionally like they're party brands. There's other brands that are status brands. There's other brands that, are heritage brands because they want some of that history. And so I think too, the one thing to know is like, there's a lot of thought and work that goes into creating these beautiful packages at times. And, and the funny thing is sometimes people don't even think about what that might be when they're outside that. They're just like, oh, somebody does this work. But, there's people may not know why they're choosing to pick up that bottle, but it's because something in there is resonating with them in some way.
Yeah. And I think we think we're smart consumers, but like we like certain things, right? We gravitate and we go, even if we think we're educated consumers. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, before we wrap up, any other shares you want to share? Maybe, or I've always asked kind of what's, if somebody is kind of on the fence or they're like, I don't know, this kind of like, I'm sensing a little bit of like rub with my values and drinking. Like, what's maybe a word of, I know we don't do a lot of advice as coaching, but maybe what's one advice or tip you'd want to give somebody in that space?
Yeah. Well, I think in this you may recognize this from, just being a coach, but I would probably put it to that person in the form of a question in terms of, well, when you think about your drinking and your values, like what is your drinking costing you? Like, how is it hurting you right now? And also look at how is it serving you? Like, what purpose is it serving in your life right now? And then looking at what they come up with, like it might be, well, it's serving me because it helps me relax, but it's
Mm,
costing me because I really don't feel well or it's impacting my relationships. Well, then it's
yeah.
okay. Well, then based on that, how can you find what can serve that purpose to help you relax, or
Mhm.
and what can make it so that you can improve your relationship that doesn't involve alcohol,
Yeah. Love
and
it.
start exploring there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that two sides of different coins, right? Like, and one's going to maybe
Yeah.
resonate more.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Elizabeth, thank you so
Yeah.
much for your time. It was good to hear your
Of
story, and thank
course.
you for sharing about, um, with boldness about what your father's struggle and your
Mhm.
journey, and also inspiring others to really take a good look at that, like that discontent that they're feeling.
Yeah.
And I will link your page so people can follow you. I'm going to
Cool.
link the Good Drinks because that sounds like a great book.
Yes.
And if somebody is listening and you are, please tune into other episodes, give us a follow, review, share with a friend so we can help Soberish uprise. And remember, it's not about saying no to the booze, it's about saying yes to you. Have a good day.